Hi everyone, in this lecture we are going to span grid items. Spanning grid items means that you take one grid item and you span it across two or more columns or two or more row tracks. So when you want the item to get bigger, that's what we call spanning. The same thing happened when we talked about grid template areas, and when we complete it here, you're going to understand grid template areas better. So far, this is the progress that we have made. I'm not going to span the items that we have moved, that we have changed the location, but I'm going to span the other items. For example, I'm going to span item number 2 to item number 3. So it has to take both spaces. We could do that as well. So I'm going to say item -2. Let's give it a background color of light green. How can we span that? We could use the grid area property, or we could use the grid column and grid row. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the grid column and grid row. And for our next item, we are going to use grid area. So grid column, how can we span it is that for the ending, for where you want the column to end, you just add another number. You just add a larger number. That way, that grid is going to span onto that column as well. So I'm going to say column -start -1. So it is the first column, but I want the end not to be -1. I'm going to type it. So the end, I don't want it to end where the column 1 ends. I want it to end where column 2 ends. Let's save that. Let's come here. Now you can see that we have item number 2. It is spanning from into 2 columns. Now I'm going to comment this one so you know what it is that we are doing. Spanning grid items. All of them, the rest of them were basically changing grid item positions. We could also span them along the row tracks as well. Let's just grab the same value. So I'm going to say grid row, and it's going to be the same thing. Row start 1 and row end. Instead of 1, I'm just going to pass in 2. And when I save it, now this item, it is taking 4 grid cells. This is a spanned item. If you only change all of these values, the items will span. Now let's select which element we want to select. Now you can see there is something that is happening here. And that is the first row track, second row track, third and fourth. These 4 row tracks, they are what is called the explicit row tracks. What does that mean? It means that the value or the height of these row tracks has been explicitly defined. But we have an extra row track here. This is called an implicit row track. We are going to talk about explicit and implicit row tracks more in our upcoming lectures. This was just an idea that I told you. Implicit row tracks are created when our grid items, they span, and the number of the rows that we have, the grid items, they overflow the grid container. That's when we are going to end up with implicit row tracks. We also have implicit column tracks, but implicit column tracks is something that is not going to happen often. It rarely happens, but row tracks, it usually happens a lot. So we need to come up with some way to style these rows. For now, there is no other way you can style this, aside or apart from the fact that you can add another row here. You could say repeat 5 rows, which is not a good idea, because when you create the layout of your website, you have already thought of how many rows you're going to have. If you just add 1 more, then that is going to basically tear apart that blueprint of the website you have, and you will never be able to make it responsive. I'm also going to put this here. These are explicit column tracks. So we are going to talk about them later. For now, just keep in mind the row tracks, which are created automatically, the tracks, be them column or rows, they are implicit. Explicit is explicitly defined. Let's grab item number 5. This one, and span it across one column, two column, one row track, two row track, and three row tracks. So span it across 6 grid cells. We are going to do that with grid area. So I'm going to say item, which one was the item? Item number 5, item dash 5, and I'm going to say background color, light, what should I provide this time? Light salmon, light pink. Is it distinguishable? Yeah, it is distinguishable. So light pink. I'm going to say grid area. So where do we want it? It is in its current position, but so it is in the third column. First column, second column, and this is the third one. So I'm going to say column dash start is the same start that it has, but column dash end is going to be, it's going to end at the end of column number 4. This is column number 4. This is the end. And when I save that, this is spanning grid items. Okay. Oh, because this accepts 4 values. Sorry. So the first value is grid row. This is the row start. That's why I'm sure you understood that. So it's row start. Where is the row? It was the row number 2. So I'm going to say row start 2. And I'm going to say span 3. There's also span keywords that we could use, but I'm just going to stick to name of the column. That is going to overcomplicate what we are trying to do here. So I'm going to say span to 5. Let's save this is again incorrect. So the first one is row start. The second value, see, it confuses me. So row start, then we have to go step by step. Then we have column start, column dash start 3. Then we have row end. So this is row end, and then we have column end. So I'm going to say column dash end 4. There we go. So now you can see it spans onto 6 grid cells, and we are ending up with 2 implicit row tracks. All right, so that's everything that I wanted to cover in this lecture. Now, there is the span keyword that I know I said that it's going to confuse, but you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to talk about that as well. So just all the options that you have when it comes to spanning grid items. Now, let's say we want to, which element? Let's say this item number 7, I want to span it by 2 columns and by 2 rows. So it will acquire a 2 by 2 grid area, which is going to be 4 grid cells. So I'm going to say, what was it, item number 4? Item number 7, why do I keep missing that? So that is item number 7. I'm going to say background color. Does it have a defined? No, I'm just going to say red. Oh, it's too sharp. Tomato. There we go. So this is tomato. This is item number 7. Now, the way that you can do this is I'm just going to use grid column and grid row properties. So where is the starting column? We are going to say column dash start. The starting column is column 1, of course, but how many columns do you want it to span by? So this is 1 column and this is 2 columns. So we want it to span by 2 columns. So that's why we are going to just say span 2. I'm going to do the same thing for grid row. And it's row number 3. So I'm going to say row start 3. And how many rows do you want it to span by? We want to basically span it by 2 rows. And let's save that, and there we go. So it basically spans item number 7 all the way to here. Now there is an interesting thing happening here is that now this is on purpose. I did this on purpose because I wanted to show you something. And the thing is that whenever you try to span an element, a grid item, to where other grid items have changed their positions, the changed positions will not be changed at all. For example, we changed the position of the item number 8 and item number 10. This is what we call an overlapping grid. We basically have one grid on top of the other grid, and you can basically change the stacking order of this using the Z index of CSS. But if you want to basically take a look at what happens if you use the span keyword, item number 8 and item number 10, I'm just going to comment them out. Here they are. Let's just comment them out and let's take a look at them. There we go. So we have item number 7 spanned by 2 columns and spanned by 2 rows. In case you just want to take a look at this. So you can use the span keyword as well. That is all there is to know when it comes to changing the position of grid items, spanning them, and everything the rest to know. That's it for this lecture. See you in the next one.